some blue candy. Found a blue one just for you. Oh, you got one. You want it? There. Just.
Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for a day in the life of a Brewster Bear, our re-entry orientation information session. So I want to welcome you. I'm Dr. Lori Banlow. I'm the superintendent of the Brewster Central School District, and I'm delighted to be here in this outstanding district. Just one housekeeping piece before we get started. Please be sure that your microphone is muted throughout the presentation so that everybody can hear. We are really excited. We have over 126 people and growing that are on with us today, so welcome and thank you. So we want to thank you families for your support, for your partnership, for your patience, and for your for your partnership with throughout this whole process and making sure that we keep our students and staff safe. We will continue to be as transparent as possible. We will continue to communicate out information as the information comes in. We know that this is a very fluid situation with the COVID-19 pandemic. Everything changes by the second, by the minute. So as we get new information, as you know, we will continue to push that information out to all of you. We have received, as of last Friday, up until this information session, we've received hundreds of questions. So we took many of those questions and we utilized those questions to prepare for our information session today. We also have a point at the end of our presentation where we have some of the questions that we will go over together. I want you to look at this because we're going to be giving you a lot of information this afternoon. And I want you to think of this as a big funnel. So we're going to start off at the top of the funnel with as much information as possible, and then we're going to start to narrow it down. And what I mean by narrowing it down is that the building principals and our directors of special services will be also providing information to you based upon some of the questions that we've received or will continue to receive, just so that they're able to give you building specific details that many of you want to know. So, that information will be coming out as well this week. So after this session, if you have further questions, please send those questions to us. We're going to continue to keep updating our frequently asked question document. We will also take many of those questions, as I said, and put them into our videos and other orientation information that we will continue to put up on the re-entry website. Parents, be sure to continue to revisit that website because it's a living document, and we will continue, as I said, to keep it updated as we get new information. So let's move to the next slide. Thank you, Dr. Gosh. So today our agenda is, we're going to be talking about what we're doing to prepare overall in the Brewster Central School District with facilities, transportation, child nutrition, curriculum instruction and assessment, And we want to walk you through what the day would look like if you decide that you want to choose the hybrid model for your child, or if you want to do 100% online digital. So we know this is a really, really big decision. I know many of us are here, are administrators, we have different roles that we play, but we're also parents. So many of us have students in college, younger children. So we are with you, we are in this together, we are partnering with you. If there is a question that you have that is personal in nature, that you really need some support and some specific details to, please reach out to your building administration so they can help you and walk you through your decision. So we're going to cover a lot of information today, so get ready. You might want to take notes, and we will put the recording of this up on the website tomorrow. All right, so who are our panelists today? We have several panelists. We have Dr. Louis Casaro. He is our medical director for the Brewster Central School District. We call him our own Dr. Fauci. He's been amazing. We also have Frank Guglieri. He is the regional safety coordinator for Putnam Westchester BOCES. These two gentlemen have been instrumental in working with us throughout our process, in addition to State Education Department and the Department of Health, to help guide our decisions on sound medical advice. I'm here. And also Dr. Gosh, our Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment, Mr. Victor Carlson, our Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Operations, and Dr. Elizabeth Kennedy, Pupil Personnel Services. I also need to mention that we have every single one of our building principals. Thank you, principals, for joining us. They've been working extremely hard. And also our directors are also joining us. So this is a united team. We have a great administrative team. And I'm really happy that they're joining us as well today. So thank you to our administrators. Okay, so how did we receive feedback in order to get to this point? So as you know, this process started in March. And what we did coming up to this particular point where we started to talk about reentry, we had, as you know, we had the regional thought exchange through Putnam Westchester BOCES, which was an excellent way for us to get information as a region, but also as a Brewster family. So what really came out clearly in that thought exchange, as many of you have already seen, is health and safety of our students and staff, PPE, maintaining proper social distancing, maintaining confidentially, God forbid if we had a student or staff member that contracted COVID-19, trying to put our students in cohorts so we can isolate them into little learning pods, and also kind of kicking up our academics a little bit. Our teachers did an incredible job on the dime turning up the digital learning, but we know we can do better. So that was another thing that came through. We also had staff, student, parent, guardian surveys, as many of you know, and we had subcommittees. The governor, as you know, gave us particular focus groups that needed to come together with all stakeholders. We had parents, community members, administrators, teachers, board members. We had several people on those subcommittees to help us to make the decision. Now, if we go to the next slide, thank you, Dr. Gosh. So how did we arrive at our determinations? So as I mentioned, I'm going to start with something that's not up here, is our Safety, Health, and Emergency Planning Committee that has been in the district long before I got here. It is the overall committee that is comprised of our first responders in the region, administrators, teachers. Dr. Casaro was on it, Frank was on it, our regional safety specialist, and we also had a variety of different community members on our SHEP committee. So that committee oversees all of our lockdown drills, all of our emergencies in the district. So we started there right away, as you all know, in March, because we were preparing. We also consulted on a daily basis with Dr. Casaro, as I mentioned, and Frank Guglieri, as I mentioned as well. And we collaborated with all of our collective bargaining units. I want to thank the BTA, the SEIU, and all of our other units for working closely with us, because we kept asking folks, what are we forgetting? What do we need to make sure that we're thinking about? So that was something that was a continuous theme. Our subcommittees worked hard. They came up with the recommendations. As you know, there was a regional state reentry committee that we had representation on from 2 of our administrators in the district that gave us some guidance. And then those subcommittees got together and started to work diligently on what we think our reentry in Brewster Central School District will look like. Parents, please keep in mind that there are several other districts that are doing the hybrid model like we are. Every district is different. Every enrollment is different. Every facility is different. So we really had to take a look at all of our spaces, and we'll talk more about that as we go through our presentation. We also have regional collegial circles. That's not only the superintendents in the region that I would meet with on a weekly basis to talk, to compare notes, to share ideas, but also, Dr. Gosh's regional circle, the finance regional circle. So several groups, principals, vice principals met with their colleagues so we can make sure that we're covering all the bases. We received guidance from the State Department of Health and also guidance from the New York State Education Department. And the Department of Health guidance, of course, will trump the state ed guidance. They mirrored each other in many ways, but if there was ever anything contradictory, of course, we would check with Dr. Casaro and the Putnam County Department of Health and make sure that we're on track. But just know that that really was really the strong point in all of our decision making. All right, so we're going to start to talk about facilities and what are we doing to prepare? What are the protocols that have been put into place? And what are the steps that we've taken to ensure the cleanest possible learning environment for our students and our staff? So the frequency is key for our custodians, our maintenance workers. So, we want to make sure that we're taking care on a daily basis, continuously, those high touch surfaces. And you can see that here: counters, door handles, light switches, railings. I won't read all of those, but those will be the areas that we'll be focused on a daily basis. We also have hospital grade disinfectant, high quality cleaning agents. They all must be student friendly. They all must be safe in the educational environment. So I just want to assure you of that. And I'm sure that Frank might be able to talk about that later for us. The technique that we use in all of our classrooms, Brewster really is ahead of the game. And I really want to thank our Director of Facilities, Mr. Glenn Fryer. Glenn has not missed a beat. So because of, I just want to show the Clorox electrostatic sprayer that is utilized each night. We did utilize this last spring when we had a small issue that we were concerned about, but this will be done nightly on a daily basis to make sure that our surfaces are cleaned. So we're going to be doing deep cleaning every night. We do not need a deep cleaning day in Brewster because we want to get as much academics and get our kids with us as much as possible. So this deep cleaning will take place at night. Also, I'm not going to go into the other parts of it, Dr. Gosh. We also have a specific, for our bathrooms, we have a specific pressure washer, wet vacuum process. This will be online if you want to really watch the video and get a full glance of what will be done with our bathrooms in the evening, because that is an important area that we must keep clean. And our high touch surfaces, we're going to be using now a microfiber disinfectant cloth. Okay. Hand sanitizer dispensers are going to be installed throughout the common areas, throughout the buildings, but nothing replaces washing your hands for 20 seconds and soap and water. So I want to show a picture of, we have installed new sinks, thank you Glenn, in JFK. And also, I think Dr. Gosh, is this CD Star? I don't remember which one. But you'll notice that in all of our cafeterias, we're putting in sinks. So the children, when they come into the cafeteria, they wash their hands before lunch and they wash their hands after lunch. So we want to just encourage that for our students. Also, there'll be signage throughout the buildings with CDC guidelines that have been encouraged through the Department of Health and the CDC. And our water fountains will no longer be working. We have replaced our water fountains with bottle filling stations. So students can use their own dispensers to fill those water bottles. All right, transportation. Before I get started, I want to thank Mary Smith. Mary is our supervisor of transportation and it just really also worked very, very hard, ran several different scenarios for us to do. So, so what's going to be different about buses? What are the safety measures that we're going to put into place? So let's take a look at that now. So our bus configuration, the students will be assigned to seats at a social distance. So I just want to show you the inside of a bus. So we're going to, as you can see, the students will be separated. They'll be assigned a seat. We will have students, students in the same family will sit together. We hope that that works out okay. But students will be loaded from the back, at the back of the bus, and they will be released from the front of the bus. Students will need to come onto the bus with a mask. If they don't have a mask, then we'll make sure that we have one available for them. In order to maintain the proper number of students on the bus and to meet the guidelines for social distancing, we will have 2 tiers, 2 waves for each building this year. Parents can also, if they like, drive their child to and from school. Building principal, once we get those surveys handed in by midnight next Monday night, what your decision is. I know it's a big decision, whether you want to go hybrid or remote. Your building principals will be able to see how many parents are driving their child to school, and they will be setting up traffic areas for parking. They know their buildings best, and there'll be several different entrances and exits of the school building to keep students separated, so you don't have mass students walking in and out of the building. So the rear, as I said, can you go back one second, Dr. Gosh? I just want to make sure I covered all that. Thank you. Okay, so students and staff, as I said, are required to wear masks at all times on the bus. There will be masks if your child forgets their mask. We have stringent cleaning and disinfecting schedules. So after each run, all of the buses will be cleaned and disinfected right after each run. And students and staff will receive ongoing training and reminders. So this week, Mr. Carlson has been working with Mr. Fryer and Mrs. Smith. And also, we're going to be talking about food services in a minute. They're putting together some videos that we're going to be putting up online just to show the kids and show you exactly what it's going to look like, so they're not that they're not surprised, that they're able to see what the bus is going to look like. We know it's going to be hard for the kids to get back. We know it's going to be hard for the staff to get back. So we want to try to ease as much anxiety as we can. So we're going to be showing some orientation videos of the bus, what the buildings are going to look like, and also we're going to be showing some videos of food service. So that will be continuous, and we'll be continuing to remind folks. So Child Nutrition Services, once again, I want to thank Kathy Hancock. Kathy is our Director of Child Nutrition Services, and she started with this work in the spring when the outbreak started. So let's talk about what are some of the additional safety measures that will be utilized for this breakfast, lunch. Hand washing, as I showed you, will be required. We do have the sinks, as we showed you, in the cafeterias. That's required before and after the students eat. Breakfast and lunch, which was already started in the spring, will be contactless. We cannot no longer have a buffet style, as everybody knows. And they will be served, very, very carefully with contactless. And we will have videos to show all that. And students will eat in the cafeteria. We're going to show some pictures throughout the presentation today so you can see how we're going to be separating students at a social distance, but also allowing some time where they're able to socialize and communicate, because that's so critical for their development. We're very worried about our kids. Weekly meal distribution will continue to be available when students are not in schools for those families that need that. Okay, so Dr. Gosh, you want to jump in here? We're going to talk about the social emotional piece.
I would love to, thank you. Okay, so now that we've outlined some of our health and safety protocols, we're going to switch a bit and think about some other structures that students will need in order to be successful in the 2021 school year. At the top of our decision-making list, at the forefront of our thinking, has to be social emotional learning. Students have not been attending in-person instruction since March. They'll be entering in September, whether that's remotely or in person, with staff members that they haven't worked with before, in all likelihood. And there's been a whole lot of things that have happened between when they left us in person to when they're returning to us. So we need to make sure that we're intentional about the way in which we welcome them back. The Social Emotional Learning Subcommittee was chaired by Mr. Allen, the assistant principal at CV Star, Mrs. Hernandez, the assistant principal at the middle school, and myself. And we have been meeting weekly since the middle of June. And what we talked about is, number one, we need to make sure that we're explicit that social emotional learning is important, and we need to make sure we build in structures to have that happen. The second piece that we wanted to share is that we have a theme for welcoming students back. It's called Bears Connect. So what building level teams have been working on are different ways in a developmentally appropriate manner to make sure we're doing the three things that are listed at the bottom in those bullet points: building community, fostering relationships, and creating connections. We want to make sure that every student feels as though they belong, and that they know that school, whether they're attending remotely or in person, school is a safe place for them emotionally and physically. So to that end, we'll be looking at that first week and as a quote unquote soft opening, meaning we're not going to jump right into academics without starting to build relationships. So those building level teams are working hard to make sure that those activities that students engage in that first week make it clear that we value students, we care about them, we're happy that we're back together, and to create those opportunities for student to student and student to teacher connections. The second piece has to do with organization, or what we call in the education world, executive functioning. So we know that the students that did really well with distance learning are those who have higher level executive functioning skills. They can prioritize and organize their day. They're able to reach out and advocate for themselves if they need additional support. They know what resources to pull from where. So what we're doing is we are also being intentional about how we can build these executive functioning or organizational skills within our current structures. So here's an idea that's been around forever. Homeroom teacher, you probably think not a big deal, right? But what the purpose behind having a homeroom teacher, especially at the secondary level, is this is the adult that will be greeting you every day, whether it's virtual or whether it's in person. You will be accountable to this person. There will be attendance. You'll have an opportunity with that person in front of you to say, what does my schedule look for the day? Or what classes am I going to see? What work do I need? This will be another touch point for students to be able to build a connection with an adult and to have an additional resource for them. Another program that we're looking at, and we have middle school and high school teams that are attending training this week, is a program called AVID, Advancement via Individual Determination. It takes many different forms in different districts. Our value and what we see as being important in the 2021 school year are the strategies that come from this program. So things like Cornell note-taking, things like e-binders, and being able to literally organize your work in a digital and an in-person environment. Things like metacognition, which is basically getting kids to think about their thinking and getting to think about their own skills as a learner. All these things are lifelong skills that are helpful in an in-person environment and also in a digital environment, and frankly, when they leave education and go out into the real world. And finally, we are very intentional, again, you're going to hear that word a lot, about safety. We need to make sure that before students come to us that they have an idea of what they're walking into. Again, whether it's remote or in person, there will be modules that we're going to ask students to complete to understand what some of these new safety protocols are. We're also going to make sure that we have intervals of reminders for these health and safety protocols throughout the school year. And we also want to make sure that students have a chance to say, I didn't really understand what that means. Can you explain it more? Or what does that mean in my everyday life? So it's about creating these structures and systems of supports for students in order to be successful in the 2021 school year. All right, switching now to curriculum instruction and assessment. And Dr. Banlow mentioned, the really solid job that we did as educators in March when we had to just flip the switch and change in a lot of ways the craft that we've been doing for a long time. And I want to thank all the teachers and administrators and staff who poured their hearts into making that work and doing everything they can to make it work in the spring. With all that said, we know that there are areas that we need to improve on. And I think what you'll see in these next series of slides when we talk about what the instructional design will be for the 2021 school year, I think you'll see that we have taken that feedback and that we've improved those structures in order to help students be successful. All right, so there were several big idea or big picture decisions that we needed to make before we could get down into more granular details. The first is, why are we only operating at 50%? And we've gotten some questions on that, so this is a good opportunity to talk about it. Months ago, the principals took their maps of their buildings. They looked at square footage. We had the guidelines from the state, or we had an idea of what we were thinking, how many students we could fit in a given space. Then we had principals and assistant principals and custodians going into each instructional space to say, well, what are the unique characteristics of this room? And is this really all workable space or usable space? Then we had principals and assistant principals and custodians look at every nook and cranny. We had them look at non-traditional in academic or instructional spaces, such as the cafeteria and the gym. And even if we were to try and squeeze students into all those spaces, we still couldn't be at 100% capacity. And we definitely couldn't do it safely. So we're saying that we want to make sure we do this right. Health and safety of our students and staff is paramount, and 50% capacity is what we're operating at for the foreseeable future, given all the social distancing guidelines and other health and safety guidelines that we need to make sure are 100% implemented with fidelity day in and day out. So once we decided on the 50%, and once we knew that that's what we could handle, then we talk about, all right, how do we make sure we set up a rotation so that students are in school an equal amount of time, if that's the option that parents choose. So the Teaching and Learning Subcommittee had several discussions about this. I know administrators in their different regional circles had discussions about it. I know I did in mine. And we looked at a number of different models: 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, meaning 2 weeks in person, 2 weeks out, 1 week in, 1 week out for the same cohort, 2 days in, 2 days out, every other day, cleaning day in the middle. I mean, we had a multitude of options that we looked at. And at the end of the day, we decided that the Teaching and Learning Subcommittee recommended, and then we came to the determination that what is most important for our students and what we saw that they lacked the most in the spring was structure and consistency. So by bringing students in these cohorts on a Monday, Thursday, a Tuesday, Friday, with Wednesday as the rotating day, that achieved those objectives. We see students as frequently in person as we can, and that provides those additional structures and supports. I should back up and say Cohort A, because we have received some questions on this. Cohort A, if your last name begins with A and runs through L-E, you are in Cohort A. If you have a last name that begins with L-I to Z, you're in Cohort B. If you're in a household that has multiple last names, I'm in one as well, you need to please reach out to your principals and assistant principals to make sure that we have your name. We think we have the students that we need, but please double check with us. Those gray areas in terms of who is in which cohort will be decided once we receive the questionnaire feedback from parents and say, okay, where are we able to fit these students? Because it comes down to numbers and operating safely at that 50%. I also say the Wednesday rotation day, we decided on that as opposed to Monday because we wanted to make sure that we had that one cohort in more frequently. There was a lag if we did a Monday rotation. So we have really thought this out in a collaborative way, seeking input from multiple constituents. And we hope you understand that it might not be perfect, but this is the process we're going with because we believe it's what's best for our students. Something else that we learned from the survey feedback and from our Teaching and Learning Subcommittee is that parents need to know ahead of time a predictable schedule in order to secure childcare for their son or daughter if they have to work on the days when their students are not attending in-person instruction. There's a calendar linked in here. It's also on our re-entry site. Depending on which cohort you are, it's very clearly outlined every school day from September until June who is attending in-person instruction on that day. That will not change regardless of when we have snow days. It is, again, a fixed calendar. I thank Dr. Zamperlin and the administrators for bringing that idea forward. We can now plan for the entire year, and that's what it will be. All right, so we have our 50%, we have our cohort schedule. Now what? Now we have to think about what are our learning options. So there are 2 learning options that we're asking you to choose from. The first is hybrid. And when we talk about hybrid in Brewster, we're talking about 50% in person and 50% remote. That's based on the AB cohort. So each cohort will spend 50% of their time in those 2 learning modalities or modes. But please know that we're still talking about instruction 100% of the time, and we'll explain what that looks like in later slides. If you choose the all remote, these are for students who happen to be in a high-risk category or have family members that are in a high-risk category, or just parents who are uncomfortable. This is an option that the State Education Department has asked us and told us that we need to offer, and we're happily doing it. So you have the choice for your son or daughter to not attend in-person instruction at all and can, and attend all remote for the foreseeable future. And again, both options have instruction 100% of the time, and we'll talk about what those instructional designs look like. So we are asking for your commitment by Monday. And here's how this is, here's what we're asking in terms of the duration of this commitment. So if you select all remote learning, you are in that option until the end of January, which is about the end of the first semester. If you choose the hybrid model, and let's say circumstances in your family change or conditions out in the region change, and you just say, I'm just not comfortable with my son or daughter going to school, even on a 50% half-time basis, you can then elect into full remote. But once you choose full remote, we're asking that you stay in that until the end of the first semester. Again, that goes back to us being able to plan and be prepared and make sure that the learning environment is healthy and safe for our students. Okay, I just want to take a moment and talk about the distinction between all remote and homeschooling. They're very different, okay? In a homeschooling model, the parent or guardian is solely responsible for the curriculum, instruction, and assessment of that particular, of their child. You would work with my office, and we would talk about all the different benchmarks that need to be met. You need to submit an individualized home instruction plan. There are assessments that are due. There are progress reports. And we can help any parent through that process. We can help talk through the different options. We're more than happy to do that. There are a number of families that have chosen this option, and it's worked swimmingly for them and their family. It's just different than all remote. So please know that those two terms mean very different things. Also know that if you have a high schooler and you are interested in homeschooling, you're not earning credit towards a high school diploma. Again, you're basically not enrolled in the Brewster Central School District anymore. But if you have any further clarifying questions on that, please feel free to reach out. All right, so let's jump into what these designs look like at the various levels. So you're hybrid in person. It's your cohort's day to come to school. So what we're asking, anytime a student enters a bus or a school building, we're asking that their parent or guardian to sign and submit a daily health questionnaire. We're looking for the most efficient way to do this, maybe through an existing app like Parent Square. I know Mr. Trelaw is exploring a number of opportunities, but it needs to happen. We need that to be the initial screening that families submit to us before they even enter the school bus or before they enter a school building. As Dr. Banlow mentioned and demonstrated with the pictures on the school bus, when students come on, they'll expect it to be masked. If they don't have one, we have a supply. We'll give it to you. You'll be sent to a predefined seat. If you are one of the first ones on the bus, you'll sit towards the back. You may have to sit with your siblings. When we're disembarking from the bus, the front of the bus will go first in order to minimize the amount of cross contact that might happen. Once at school, Brewster staff will be there taking temperatures of all students upon arrival. It's another layer of screening that we're doing to make sure we're ensuring the safest learning environment and healthiest learning environment that we can. Things are going to be a little bit different. If you had a student in the high school previously, you knew that when they entered the building, they would be able to go to their lockers, hang out a little bit with their friends, and then maybe go grab some breakfast and then head to class. First of all, there will be no locker use at the middle school or high school. At the middle school, students will be able to bring their backpacks to class. I know that's a change, but that we just don't want students to be in areas where we just want students to be in areas, we want them to be supervised and maintaining appropriate physical distance from one another when possible. So at the high school, it might look like, okay, you can go to the cafeteria because we have staff there supervising. You can go to the library or the ILC because we have staff there as well. We just have to make sure that we have students in our sites and make sure that they're safe at all times. We wanted to show you and take this opportunity to share some pictures of what classrooms would look like at an appropriate physical distance based on State Education Department guidelines. This is an elementary school classroom. Elementary school meaning K2, I believe it's first grade. This is CV Star. CV Star is unique in that it has, for most of its furniture, 2 people tables. So we remove one of those chairs in order to attain the appropriate physical distancing. This is a middle school classroom. Something that we'll be working with our staff on is also asking that teacher desks are faced in the same direction as well. And then this is a high school, I believe, math classroom. So this is an example of what our custodians and what our principals and assistant principals have done. They've gone into each of these classrooms, and this will be what it is like for September. We'll be prepared and ready and the classrooms itself will be physically distanced. We wanted to share this as an example of what we are attempting to do in the cafeteria. So Dr. Banlow mentioned earlier polycarbonate barriers. And what we would like to be able to do is to have some of these set up in the cafeteria. That way students can actually talk to one, can look at one another when they're talking, and be at a smaller distance than the 6 feet. So I know Mr. Fryer is working with all the building principals to see what these prototypes look like in the different cafeterias. As Dr. Banlow also mentioned, we have 2 tiers of transportation, and we mentioned that for the school day because it slightly impacts our schedules. And I want to again thank Mrs. Smith at Transportation, as well as the building principals and assistant principals for being really creative about how to make all this work. So because we have 2 waves, the first students that are in are going to be the first students that are dismissed at the end of the day. And again, we cannot reiterate this enough. Even when students are at a safe physical distance, we want masks to be worn at all times. And that means students and staff and visitors. The building principals will be working with their teachers and under the guidance of Dr. Casaro to talk about what the guidelines are for mask breaks, and we'll make sure that those are built in throughout the school day. All right, so switching to what all this means for instruction. So because we're cohorting, we have 50% of the student population in, and we want all of our students in all the time, right? But a positive of having to do this is that we have half the number of students that are sitting in front of a teacher. So the amount of individualized attention and the amount of feedback and interaction between teacher and student can be greatly increased and maximized. Something that the State Education Department has asked us to do is to cohort students, not meaning A-B, but meaning keeping a single group of students together or multiple groups of students together, maybe 2 groups of students together throughout the school day. That is easier K-5, not so much at the secondary level. So what our secondary administration has done is they've looked at this and said, okay, so in order to reduce the number of pools of students and the number of transitions, we're going to decrease the number of instructional periods that might happen during the day. So obviously that has instructional implications, but we'll get into more about what that looks like. All right, these guiding principles for instructional design, you will see in all of our models. You will see in hybrid in person, you will see these principles in hybrid remote, and you will see these principles in full remote. The first thing is a regular and substantive interaction between teacher and students. This comes directly from the State Education Department guidance, and it's something that we know we need to improve on from the spring. We already talked about the social emotional needs of students, and I think you'll see some structures that are built in throughout these instructional designs in order to make that work. We wanted to make sure that we took into consideration the unique age of each band of learners and created schedules to support that. And then finally, what we heard from survey data from our teaching and learning subcommittee is the need for flexibility, especially for working parents that have younger students and might not be able to be with them during the day when synchronous instruction might take place. So we'll talk about how we've integrated that feedback into our design. All right, before we go any further, it's important to take a moment and to talk, make sure we're talking the same language. So here, when we refer to synchronous instruction, this is instruction between a teacher and a student that's taking place at the same time. Okay, it could happen virtually, it could happen in person, but it's synchronous, it's happening there. Asynchronous is when it's happening at different times. So that could be a teacher recording themselves and posting a video for students to watch. And then when I refer to asynchronous activities, those are academic exercises that are used to enhance the instruction that has taken place. So it could build on, a previous lesson. It could expand or enrich, some of the content or skills that have been previously shared between teacher and student. All right, so now remember we're K-5 hybrid model in person. So K2 for all academics are pretty much self-contained. The homeroom teacher sees them, so we're cohorted, it's all good. Grades 3 through 5, we're sticking with 2 teachers for the core area classes. And that's the model we've had. We're still working out logistics as to whether or not we're going to have teachers switch classrooms or if we're going to have students switch classrooms, and if we have them switch, how we're working all that out. But these are the structures that we're moving forward with. We need to take a minute and talk about special areas because we've received some questions on this. So special areas are absolutely still happening. They are an important part of a holistic educational experience for students. They might look a little different. PE, we're going to try and go outside as much as possible, but I know Mr. Berardo has worked with his team to talk about, a lot of maybe what were previously team sports now might be moving towards more personal fitness activities, right? So we can make that work. There was a question that we received about shared supplies in an art room. We're going to have to figure out how we can, number one, adjust our curriculum a bit, and number two, how we can individualize and unshare art supplies and make that work. In terms of the library, students will still have access to books. We're going to have to put in a different process. Dr. Casaro has mentioned that allowing books to sit for a week once they're returned would be something that that we could work on. So we'll work on implementing this with our library media specialists, K-12.
Dr. Gosh,
yes,
can I just kick in? Just a couple things I wanted to mention to our families is that as we move through this process, a lot more questions come up. So the principals will be meeting with Dr. Casaro on Thursday for many numerous questions that they have as we continue to drill down that funnel. And I have to say, our PTA presidents, I meet with them on a monthly basis. Several of them had already mentioned last spring that it would be great to have individual, boxes of supplies for students. So I thank them for that. Thanks, Dr. Gosh.
Thank you. So let's talk about music, because Dr. Casaro and the principals and our performing arts coordinator, Mrs. Patty Taylor, we all met and we talked about what music instruction could look like. So here's at K2 for general music. Dr. Zamperlin has mentioned that Mrs. Kaler can bring a section of students into the auditorium, have them spread throughout the auditorium at a safe social distance, and allow them to engage in a music class and curriculum. At CV Star, we're working out what our capacity is, because if you're singing, it's at least 12 feet. So we want to make sure that we have that area scoped out well, but in all likelihood, there will be curricular adjustments to general music classes. In terms of band, chorus, and orchestra, now we're talking grades 4 through 12. Orchestra, we're in good shape. You can still be at a safe social distance of 6 feet, and we can make that work. There will be no large group ensembles for band and for chorus. It just can't happen. We might be able to do, and we're aiming to do small group lessons. So we're working through all those details, but again, those are the general guidelines and framework that we're working within. We've also received some questions about recess. Recess, yes, will happen, and we're working with Dr. Casaro on what that looks like. One variable that we can control is the number of students that are in a given recess area at a time. So that's one consideration that we're looking at. We also know the transmission rate outside is much lower than it is inside, but we will make sure that recess happens in a safe way under the advisement of Dr. Casaro. And then finally, lunch. Students will be eating in the cafeteria. It's a great thing. They don't have to sit in their classrooms all day and eat. So we are, again, working to make sure that there's a safe space, a safe physical distance between students, or that we have those polycarbonate barriers in place. All right, still in the hybrid model, middle school. The middle school has reduced the number of periods, therefore reducing the number of transitions, and they've taken a really unique developmental approach to how they are to this year. So when a student attends in-person instruction in Wells Middle School, they will be seeing all of their core academic teachers. They'll be seeing math, English, science, social studies, and then reading and world language. So those are the courses that they're going to see in addition to lunch and recess when students are in person at Wells Middle School. Again, remembering that instead of teachers having 25 or 26 students, they're going to have 12 or 13 in front of them. So the amount of teacher-student interaction will be greatly increased. On to the high school. So again, we talked about decreasing the number of periods, but making those periods longer at the high school. All students, Mrs. Horler will do some additional advisement around the schedule as we get further along in our planning, which we anticipate being there very soon. But all students will still have 8 courses. So we don't have to worry about not being able to take courses or not being able to take electives. All students still have 8 courses. But know that in what we're looking to do, not all 8 of those courses are going to meet on a given day. It just can't happen given the amount of instructional time that we would have. So there will be a modification that way in terms of a rotating schedule. There will also be 2 lunch waves. So again, if you're the first students in, you'll have the first lunch and you'll be the first ones that are dismissed. All right, so that was in-person instruction in the hybrid model. Now let's switch to remote instruction in the hybrid model. Again, same guiding principles, making sure that we're looking at this developmentally. So K-5 hybrid remote. So what we heard from our teaching and learning subcommittee, and it came through loud and clear, is that we cannot expect that if we are in a hybrid model at the K-5 level, we cannot expect that parents are going to be able to sit next to their son or daughter and be able to have them, help them learn. Students at the K-5 level are not all independent learners when it comes to, especially when it comes to digital interaction. So we needed to make sure that we approach this in a way where students wouldn't fall behind if they didn't have that parent sitting right next to them at home. So what the hybrid remote model will be largely at the K-5 level is asynchronous instruction and activities. So videos that are posted, activities that are asked to be done, with the flexibility for families to do that during the day if that works for their schedule, or if they happen to work during the day and they come home later at night to sit with their son or daughter and to do that work. However, thanks to the great thinking of Mrs. Andriello and Dr. Zamperlin, we are going to be creating opportunities for synchronous or same time connection between teacher and students at home if they're able to. If they're not able to, they're not going to be missing any new instruction. But if they are able to, they can connect and attend synchronously. So they're on Zoom, the teacher's in the classroom, and they're conducting a morning meeting. There's also a block of time at the K-5 level called intervention and enrichment that exists already. And what we would look to do is we would also look to have students remote in during that time, again, through Zoom or Google Meet, as a way to access their teacher. But there will be no new instruction that happens on a hybrid remote day, because we heard from your feedback that it's just an unfair expectation for parents of K-5 students. Now, hybrid in-person model at the middle school is all core classes. Hybrid remote model at the middle school is encore classes. And what we mean by encore are electives, PE health, art, tech, some music classes. So when students are in person, they're seeing core. When they're home, they're engaging in these encore classes. There'll be scheduled times where they need to sync in and remote in and Zoom in, and that starts in homeroom. And then they're going to have classes where they need to be online there with their teacher. They're also going to have time built into their schedule because we know that middle school students need structure. There's also going to be time built into their schedule for core classes. So they'll know from, let's just say, for example, 12:30 to 1:30, they need to be doing the work for math, English, science, social studies that their teachers are assigning as an extension of the day. This is an example of a student schedule. Please know it's just an example, but it just illustrates for us what we're thinking and what our goal is as we try to operationalize all this. So whether you're in person or remote, it's at homeroom, it's at accountability device, it's at connection. Then if you're in person, as you can see here, all of our core classes. If you're remote, you can see here you have your on-core classes with the core work etched in. So in order to give middle school students a hint that this is what you're supposed to be doing during this time. High school remote, this is the easiest one. They have a homeroom, they have to log on, they have to Zoom in and be in that homeroom. And then they follow their schedule. If there are periods, let's say 1 through 5 or 1 through 6 that run that day, when period 1 starts, you get your butt on Zoom and you log in and you attend synchronous instruction with your teacher. Now, if students are in the hybrid model, it's possible that they're not, because remember the periods are longer, it's possible that they're not going to be synchronous the entire time, but there will be a set amount of time, a minimum amount of time that students are synchronous with their teachers if their courses are running that day. Because all 8 courses do not run on the same day, there is still an expectation for high school students to complete that asynchronous work. So work is going to be assigned. If your math class doesn't meet that day, work is going to be assigned to you and to be completed for the next time that when you see your teacher, and you can move forward. Something else that we're excited about are office hours. So once students go home, Teachers at the high school will have office hours that students can remote into. So it's completely optional, but it's a set amount of time where a teacher says, this is my Zoom link or my Google Meet link. Hop in if you have any questions on the lesson that we talked about today or any of the work that we're asking you to do. All right, so that's our beautiful hybrid model. Now let's go into our 100% all remote model. So let's starting with the high school. Basically, they would follow a typical schedule. So whatever courses run at the high school that time, you're logging in, you're attending class with that teacher for X amount of minutes, and then you would have asynchronous activities that would take place. So that's at the high school level, developmentally appropriate, in my opinion, for a high schooler. Moving into the middle school. What we're hoping to do, and what would be the cleanest option, is if we were able to have all remote sections of Social Studies 8, English 8, let's say, right? And that would be dependent upon meeting a certain threshold in terms of numbers. So that this is an example of us really needing more information in order to say, yep, definitely this is what it's going to be. But that's our goal. If we don't meet a certain threshold, then we would have to work with teachers about how we can create synchronous activities for students. Because remember, on days when the hybrid students are in person, they're meeting with their core classes, we would need to create a similar experience for middle school students for their core classes. Encore would be the same as the hybrid remote option, where you're logging in and you're with your Encore teachers during that time. And again, that's synchronous instruction and asynchronous activities. I can't emphasize enough, K-8, so much of these final decisions are based on what you submit to us in terms of what your decision is for your son or daughter for the first semester. So that's why we can't give more definitive, this is what it's going to be. 100% K-5, this again is going to have to be developmentally appropriate, a balance of synchronous and asynchronous instruction and activities. Here's a key difference and an important thing. If you're selecting 100% remote for your K-5 student, please, please, please take into consideration how much time you're able to sit with them to help them attend synchronous instruction. 100% remote might not be the best option if you have some sort of situation where an adult is not able to sit with them, because there will be, they don't have that in-person experience that the hybrid students have when they're in person, right? So we need to make sure that there's synchronous instruction. That will happen during the school day. If students aren't able to attend that synchronous instruction, they would miss that, right? So we need to make, that's an important consideration if you're thinking about, I have a K-5 student and is this the right option for me? And we can talk that through. I'm happy to have a conversation with anyone who would like to do that, but please think about that as you're making this decision. Again, the amount of synchronous time depends on the level and the age of the students. Kindergarten is not going to have as much synchronous time in front of a computer as a fifth grader is going to be. And we're going to work, Maggie and Frank and I, with K-5 teachers in order to hammer that out. And again, depending on what the numbers are, we would ideally love to have standalone sections, meaning all remote sections, but we have to wait for the questionnaires to be returned to know that for sure. All right, so in terms of next steps, there are 3 plans that are due on Friday that we just found out about last Friday: remote learning plan, contact tracing, and testing plan. They'll be up by next Friday, no problem. We got it. The remote learning plan will pretty much be what I talked about, but in written form. And the contact tracing and testing plan, we have Dr. Casaro and Mr. Guglieri here to help explain that as well. Do you want to jump in, Dr. Manlon? It looked like.
Yes,
right.
yes. Whoops. Yes, thank you, Dr. Gosh. Great job. So I just want to say a couple things before I ask Dr. Casaro. We have our panelists. I want you to get ready because we're going to be tossing some questions at you in a moment. So as Dr. Gosh had mentioned, one of the requirements from the governor and from state ed and from the Department of Health was to make sure we had our contact tracing and testing plan up on the website. So I want to thank Dr. Casaro and Frank Guglieri for getting that information to us and the wording on the contact tracing. We are not testing at the school district. We do not do that. And the contact tracing takes place with the Putnam County Department of Health. So I'm going to ask Frank and Dr. Casaro. Dr. Casaro, could you start off and just maybe give us a little information about contact tracing and the testing plan? Maybe you and Frank can shed a little light on that.
The original statement by the governor was somewhat equivocal and he suggested or alluded to the fact that it would be nice to do testing on site. However, on a practical note, it's very difficult to do testing in a school setting, particularly for the elementary and middle schoolers, because parents would have to actually be there and they would have to provide written permission for the testing. It would imply that we need additional personnel to do the testing, and we would have to contract with other providers to provide the testing. What we've decided to do is to work with the local healthcare system, the primary care physicians, the urgent care centers, to provide the testing on request. Now, we will help determine who needs testing, and we will speak to families and have them, the students or staff member, referred to primary care or urgent care or the public health department for appropriate testing intervention. So we're going to partner with the community to provide this service. Similarly, with contact tracing, which is basically to determine who an infected individual has had contact with, and to then suggest isolation so that there isn't further community spread. We're going to partner with the public health department as well as the services within New York State that provides contact tracing through the program organized and which is in place. These two services really cannot be provided by a school district. In colleges, they are entertaining testing on site, but it's an ongoing process, testing multiple times per week on an ongoing basis, so that testing once or twice is not really sufficient to carry out the plan that we really need. And by partnering with the local communities, we can provide the services with people who know you, know your health condition, and also partner with the public health department to do the contact tracing.
Thank you, Dr. Casaro. And all this information is now up on our reentry website. I want to thank Frank Guglieri. And the other piece was, Frank was going to be getting a flow chart from the State Department of Health. Frank, do you want to mention anything here?
Sure. Thanks, Dr. Banlow. Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. So just to piggyback on what Dr. Corsaro said, and actually something that you said a little bit earlier, Dr. Banlow, is, one of the things that, while we have a lot of strengths, and you highlighted a lot of them, one of the big pieces is our community partnerships, right? So the Putnam County Department of Health has been instrumental at every step of this process as well. And, at one point, prior to, Brewster and all the other school districts closing, we were having daily and sometimes multiple times a day calls with the health department, and we've continued that relationship throughout the summer, really, and all while we're closing. So we developed basically a very standard operating procedure type of flow chart that will help districts walk through the possible cases if somebody tests COVID positive, or is a presumed COVID positive, or is a contact of a contact. But, really the big piece that I want everybody to really be aware of is, number one, the health department typically runs that show, so to speak, right? They're going to be advising the district on how they want to do the contact tracing. They're going to, request certain information from the district so that they could make their contacts. But really the district at that point is just, providing information. They're really a secondary conduit. They're really not the primary avenue of information. So that's really a big piece. And again, I go back to Dr. Corsaro's point, off of the governor's statement, and that's kind of what we listed out there on how that plan would take place. The other piece of it is when these positive cases start to come about, and the health department is going to be doing, contacting those people that may have come in contact with that positive case. that will come from the health department, and really nothing is going to be coming from the district on that for a number of different reasons. One, the health department employs disease detectives, and I don't know that's the official name for them, but that's what we kind of call them, right? But they're the people that are doing those types of contact tracing and are doing those case follow-ups. The second piece of that is there's a lot of regulations that people are maybe not aware of that the school has to follow, HIPAA laws, privacy laws, and those types of things. So they really can't share information that hasn't really been clear with the health department. So for all these reasons is, the crux of it. That's why this is the plan that Putnam County, and I will say Putnam County, has developed to inform anyone of a COVID positive case. So I just want to, highlight those parts. And I'll Dr. Banlow, do you want me to talk about closing here, or am I a little bit preemptive?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I got, we're getting a good show going here.
we
So
go.
I don't
Here's-
want, yeah.
Frank, here's our first question. Dr. Casaro, what is the mechanism for closing school?
Great. So on that, Doctor, you want to take it or do you want me to?
I can jump in on this one. As far as the district is concerned, there are metrics related to the infectivity within a community. And the governor has established these metrics. And if there is 5% community infection over a 14-day period or 9% over a 7-day period, the district would be automatically closed. Now, we don't have any published data as to the metrics about closing an individual school if there is infection within the school. These decisions will be made in conjunction with the public health department. Mayor de Blasio has recently come out with a statement for New York City schools that if there are 2 cases of documented COVID disease in separate classrooms, that would be indication for a New York City school to be closed. And I have suggested to our administration to consider this as a metric for consideration. The public health department, of course, would have to weigh into the decision, and contacts would have to be established as to the source of infection. However, if we have 2 cases within the school in separate classrooms, that would be a reason for concern. My other concern is that right now we have a very low infectivity rate in the community, which actually speaks well for us to be able to open schools safely. That may change as we get into school opening. We cannot guarantee 100% safety of allowing students into the school that are not infected. Even our questionnaire doesn't allow or doesn't give us the ability to screen for someone who's an asymptomatic carrier or who might be infective. But if everyone is wearing face masks, appropriate face masks, not a face mask that is a bandana or an alligator or a face mask with a button that allows all of the secretions to pass right through the face mask. If you're using an appropriate face mask, it mitigates the potential for an asymptomatic carrier to transmit disease. So all of these mitigation procedures, including hand washing and social distancing, will hopefully be a barrier to further community infection.
Thank you, Dr. Casaro. Thank you, Frank. Okay, so we'll go to our next question. What happens when a student gets sick? So this goes to our protocol. Dr. Casaro, could you?
The protocol is very straightforward. If someone is within the classroom and gets sick, the school nurse is to be notified. The student must be wearing a face mask and must be escorted to a quarantine room where the school nurse will determine the severity of the child's illness. If the primary symptoms relate to COVID disease, and the prime symptoms there would include fever, which is really only present in 40 to 50% of active infective cases, coughing or respiratory embarrassment, any one of those 3 symptoms, that would warrant concern for active COVID disease. Certainly there are other symptoms that, that are not strictly speaking COVID, but are suggestive. That would include abdominal complaints of vomiting, diarrhea, belly pain, and soreness of throat. And the last one is loss of taste and smell. These are all suggestive of active COVID disease. that student or faculty member will be escorted off the school grounds and asked to seek medical attention. Anyone who's been in contact within a classroom with that person or has had close contact less than 6 feet for more than 10 minutes would be another close contact. Those people will be referred to their private physician for appropriate testing and intervention, and then referral to the public health department for contact tracing. So that would be the basic mechanism. Our nurses have been informed as to how to do triage, and the triage would include taking temperatures, taking pulse oximetry readings, which measure oxygenation, and listening to the lungs for any signs of pulmonary infection. Should these symptoms occur, that would be another reason to seriously be concerned about COVID disease. As far as MIS-C disease, which is a scary one, it usually follows when there's an uptick in the community infection rate, so that we don't have to necessarily worry with our low infectivity rate, but should our infectivity rates get higher, or certainly in the South where the infectivity rates are sky high to begin with, MIS-C disease in children is a concern and needs to be watched for.
Thank you, Dr. Casaro. And I want to thank our nurses who have been busy working this summer, really getting a lot of in-service on this. Okay, so we're going to go to our next questions. Okay, can I change my mind in terms of remote learning, that the type of learning my students engaged in? Dr. Gosh?
Sure. So just to reiterate what I had mentioned before, if you are choosing all remote learning, you are in that option until the end of the first semester, which is approximately the end of January. If you begin in the hybrid mode and circumstances change within your family, or you start to become more uncomfortable with what is happening with conditions regionally, then you can go to all remote learning. But once you're in all remote learning, you're locked in through the end of the first semester. And that again is for our planning and safety purposes.
Thank you, Dr. Gosh.
I can take this one as well if you'd like. Okay,
Yeah.
so we received the question, if your son or daughter is ill, can they, but still would like to attend instruction, can they do so in remote learning? So the answer to the high school is absolutely yes. The middle school, the answer is no, because again, remember, if you're in person, you are attending core classes at the middle school. If it's your day to be remote, then you are attending encore classes. So if you're supposed to be there and you're sick, your classes aren't running on that particular day. So you'll be able to do the assignments that the teachers post for your core classes, but not for encore. And at K-5, the question is, we really need more information. It depends. In all likelihood, they would not be as successful in completing that work remotely as they would be at the high school level.
Thank you. And how will IEP services be delivered, and what type of 504 accommodation? So I'm going to ask Dr. Kennedy.
Good evening, everybody. Okay, so the answer to this question is complex and depends on each individual IEP or 504, which as we proceed, we will be reviewing on a case-by-case basis. Also, as Dr. Banlow has stated, this is a very fluid situation. The results of the parent survey being distributed this week will help us get a better sense of how many students will be working remotely and how many will be participating in the hybrid model to start the year. This information will help determine some of our next steps as far as supporting the reentry of every student with an IEP or a 504, including the possibility of having students with significant special needs participating in daily in-person instruction when it is safe to do so. As soon as we have this information, we'll be better able to assess the building space and determine what would be required in order to bring more students with IEPs and 504s in for daily in-person instruction, again, when it is safe for us to do so. We realize that this overall situation is particularly challenging for our students with special needs, and we're very committed to doing everything that we can to help every student get off to a great start this year and make progress all throughout. Within the parameters of the guidance issued by the State Ed Department and the Department of Health, we're going to do whatever we can for all of our students. Within the hybrid model, IEP services will be delivered both in person and via remote instruction. The same will occur for 504 accommodations. Across models, instruction will be differentiated according to individual student needs. In addition to this, our approach for all students with IEPs and 504s will include a heightened emphasis on the development of executive functioning skills, which Dr. Gosh spoke about earlier. We will be working even more diligently to help all of our students with special needs develop their organizational skills, their ability to initiate tasks independently and follow through with them, as well as to be adaptable and flexible. These are the skills that will help prepare them to effectively participate and be successful across the instructional models. For all students with IEPs and 504s, when in person, educators will teach and support students with their responsibilities as digital learners, just preparing them for being in remote learning conditions, following a schedule, managing their own time, accessing various platforms, and learning how to self-motivate when required to work independently. All of the staff supporting students with IEPs or 504s will be informed prior to the start of the school year for our students of the students' recommended program modifications and testing accommodations, and the requirement that they provide these services in person and also to the extent possible while in virtual learning. The district is ensuring that all students have access to the necessary technology in order to use their device in school and at home. The individual technological needs of classified students were reviewed at each student's annual CSE held last spring. Our 504 annual reviews will be taking place throughout this fall. Students who require additional technology accommodations were provided with necessary devices. Our district assistive technology consultant, Donna Schneider, also maintains frequent collaboration with the PPS administration, special education, instructional staff, parents, and students in order to maximize student learning in response to this support. And devices are equipped with necessary apps and programs that support student learning as indicated in their IEP or 504. When needed to support remote learning, physical materials will also be made available to students and families if needed in order to adequately support the students' progress. Us PPS administrators and CSE chair people will be meeting with special ed instructional staff as well as non-instructional staff frequently, but at the very minimum, at least one time monthly to provide direction and guidance and resources that will continuously support our staff and our students throughout the year within the 3 instructional models. They'll continue to provide information updates to parents verbally and in writing through multiple formats with translation support as needed. Depending on each student's individual needs, we may call a program review of the IEP or the 504 to determine what supports are appropriate as we move forward. Student progress will be monitored through digital and other assessment options. As always, we welcome parent input throughout the process, and we invite parents to contact us regarding any questions or concerns as we move forward. We thank the parents who have reached out to us so far, as our conversations have helped us to refine our plans for supporting all of our students. We're committed to doing this for everyone and welcome anyone who has questions or concerns about your child's program to please reach out to us at any time. We'll be happy to collaborate on how to best navigate this situation for your child.
Thank you, Dr. Kennedy. And families, I want you to know that Dr. Kennedy and her PPS team continue to be strong advocates for our special education students. And as Dr. Kennedy said, we're going to be watching the survey numbers that come in, and this is a fluid situation, so we are keeping very open-minded to making sure we try to get as many students in as possible. Okay, so will the school day be shorter, Dr. Gosh?
Sure. So because we have 2 waves of transportation, that impacts what the schedule will look like for the day. We're not talking half days shorter, but we are talking fewer minutes. We can't answer that definitively. We can answer that with a yes, but in terms of how much, we can't do that at this point. We need to have all of our data available for us to make this next set of decisions because, as you know, the bus runs at the high school impact the JFK, CV Star, and the middle school are on the same band as well. So we're working through all these details and we'll give you all much more detailed information when we are able to.
Thank you. Okay, our next question is, what about shared supplies, library books? I know Dr. Gosh had spoken about that. Is there anything else you want to add? I think you covered that. Okay, she says she's got it. All right, she covered it. Okay, next question. Why do you not have a deep cleaning day? And we had mentioned that we do not need the deep cleaning day. We want the kids in as much as possible. We are doing deep cleaning every night. And when can we return to 5-day in-person instruction? That will be decided by the governor, by the State Department of Health. The science will lead us to that 5-day. We want to have the kids back, but we cannot do that until it is safe to do so. So we need to follow the guidelines at this point. So we can't wait to see all of you. We miss all of you. And when will mask breaks be built in, and how can younger students handle that? Dr. Gosh, do you want to, I know you spoke to the building principals. And
Yep, sure. Just quickly, we'll be working with Dr. Casaro under his guidance. The building principals will work with teachers to build in mask breaks that are appropriate for the age level of students. But also we'll be talking to students about masks, about how appropriate hygiene as part of our ongoing commitment to instructing students in these new processes and procedures.
And Dr. Casaro reminds us that we have to make sure that we get the kids outside, give them those breaks in order for them to make sure they're learning. So we will get the kids outside as much as possible. Okay, why aren't in-person classes running 5 days per week? That was pretty much, we answered that with the last question. And how will we orient students to the new building processes? Dr. Gosh?
So in addition to the student modules that we will ask students to complete, we'll have several parent videos that can serve to assist parents in assisting their students. And we also the building principals are working diligently on getting students that are brand new to the building into the building before school starts. So our kindergartners, our 3rd graders entering CV Star, our 6th graders entering the middle school, and our 9th graders entering the high school. We'll have an in-person orientation. It will look different than years past. There'll probably only be one parent or guardian that can come with each student, and we'll have to stagger times, but we want to make sure that students at least physically get into the building if they're new to that building, to see the layout and to work that through. So there will be more information forthcoming on those dates.
And as I mentioned before, we are doing some on-site videos for the kids and for families ahead of time. And Frank, did you want to mention any of the videos that you're working on at Putnam, Northern Westchester, BOCES for schools?
Sure. Thanks, Dr. Banlow. Yeah, so, as part of our work, within the region, we're trying to consolidate and make as many resources we can to help facilitate all these trainings on a bunch of different levels, whether it's, on multiple languages, multiple delivery methods, posters, signs, videos, cartoons, to help deliver the instruction and reinforce it in many different ways, right? Because health and safety has now become the forefront, and there's a bunch of different topics that really need to be covered and reinforced. And we keep hearing about them, but we don't, we've been so careful so far, and I think Dr. Corsaro mentioned it a little bit earlier, it really bodes well for our region, but we don't want to give up all that ground that we gained now, right? So with that being said, we have to be ever vigilant, and we do have videos that will be publicly available that will be shared throughout the way Brewster's communication plan, however you're going to structure that, but they'll be available to anybody far and wide, on social distancing, PPE, mask wearing, donning and doffing, anything you could think of in this whole realm of COVID-19. We're working on a video or something similar for.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you. Okay, can I drop my student off at school as opposed to them taking the bus? And the answer is yes. So once you fill out the survey and let us know that you will not be taking the bus, and that will help the principals, as I mentioned earlier, to plan what the drop-off and pickup pattern will be at each of their buildings. And big thank you. So in closing, I wanted to ask the panelists, is there anything else you want to add before we close? Okay, I think everybody's covered everything. So families, we want to thank you. There's close to 200 families on right now. We will continue. Please, as I said at the beginning, the more information you get, the more questions you have. So building principals, Dr. Kennedy, they will be sending out further information, videos, answering all the many questions that continue to come in. Please continue to send in those questions to us. We will tailor those questions in our presentation and also add to our frequently asked question document on our re-entry website. Continue to check that website, parents, as we continue to post some of these informational videos, also the COVID-19 testing, all the other things that we had mentioned. So please make sure that you visit and do that. Remember, we are a Brewster family. We are with you. You are not alone in this. If you have a personal question about your child, please don't hesitate to reach out to your building administration for that support to help answer those last questions before you make your decision by Monday evening. So I want to thank you for joining us, and we're here, and have a great evening. Thank you.